I explored the banned book of the Cathars, and here's what I found. What if the god you were taught to worship wasn't the good guy? It's a radical question. For some, it's blasphemous. But it's a question that a group of people in the Middle Ages asked, and they were answered with fire and sword. They were called the Cathars, and their story is one of the most fascinating and tragic in the history of faith. 800 years ago, in the beautiful and fiercely independent lands of southern France, a Christian movement flourished. For daring to imagine a different kind of God, a different kind of reality, they were systematically annihilated, wiped from the face of the earth in a brutal crusade that some historians estimate cost 500,000, maybe even 1,000,000, lives. So, what did they believe that was so dangerous? What secrets did they hold that were worth killing for? For centuries, we've only had the version of the story told by their enemies, the records of the Inquisition that hunted them down. Their own books, their gospels, their sacred texts were burned, almost all of them, but almost isn't all. A few of their texts survived, smuggled out of burning castles, hidden for centuries. These banned books are a window into a lost world, and for the past few months, I've been on a journey to explore them, to piece together the story of the Cathars, in their own words, and what I've found changes everything you think you know about the history of Christianity. To understand the Cathars, you first have to understand their world. This wasn't just medieval France as we picture it. This was the Languedoc, a land with its own language, Languedoc, its own vibrant culture, and a fierce spirit of independence. The lords here, like the powerful counts of Toulouse, saw themselves as equals to the King of France, not his subjects. It was a land of poets, of courtly love, of intellectual curiosity, and it was a land deeply disillusioned with the official church. By the 12th and 13th centuries, the Roman Catholic Church was, in many places, a shadow of its spiritual ideals. It was a political superpower, immensely wealthy and often morally corrupt. Bishops bought their offices in a practice called simony. They lived like princes, dripping in gold and commanding armies. The local clergy were often ignorant and lived in poverty, while the institution they served amassed incredible fortunes. For the common person, and even for many nobles, there was a huge disconnect between the message of Jesus, a message of poverty, humility, and love, and the powerful, worldly institution that claimed to represent him. And into this spiritual vacuum came the Cathars. They didn't call themselves that. That was a name given to them by their enemies. From the Greek katharos, meaning pure, they simply called themselves bons hommes and bons femmes, good men and good women, and they offered a radical alternative. They lived lives of extreme simplicity and austerity. They were pacifists, they were often vegetarians, they preached in the local language, not Latin, so everyone could understand. They rejected the pomp and hierarchy of the church, practicing their faith in homes and fields instead of ornate cathedrals. They were, in essence, a direct challenge to the authority and legitimacy of Rome, and people flocked to them. From peasants and weavers to the highest echelons of the nobility, the Cathar faith spread like wildfire across the land. But their appeal wasn't just about lifestyle, it was about theology. They provided a powerful, coherent explanation for the corruption and suffering they saw all around them, an explanation they found in their most sacred and most secret texts. To guide us into this lost world of belief, let's meet two of its most important figures. Guillaberte de Castries, a Cathar bishop, a brilliant theologian, and a man so respected that he debated the Pope's own representatives, including the future Saint Dominic. He was the intellectual heart of the movement. And Esclarmonde de Foix, her name means clarity of the world. She was a powerful noblewoman. Sister to the Count of Foix, after her husband died, she dedicated her life to the Cathar faith. In 1204, in a ceremony led by Gilbert himself, she became a perfecta, the highest rank in the Cathar faith, their equivalent of a priest or bishop. Now, think about how radical that was. In the Catholic Church, a woman could be a nun, but she could never be a priest, never administer sacraments. The Cathars, however, believed the soul was a genderless spark of light trapped in a meaningless prison of flesh. Because the body was irrelevant, so was gender. Men and women were spiritually equal, and so women like Esclarmonde could become the most revered leaders of their faith. This theological belief had profound social consequences, making Catharism incredibly appealing to women who were denied power elsewhere. These are the people whose worldview was shaped by texts like this one, the Liber de Duobus Principes, or the Book of the Two Principles. This is one of the few purely Cathar theological works to survive the flames of the Inquisition, and its argument is devastatingly simple. The book starts with a simple premise. One they draw directly from the words of Jesus in the Gospel of Matthew. A good tree cannot bring forth evil fruit. They looked at the world around them, a world of disease, decay, violence, and death, and they saw evil fruit. They looked at the church, with its greed and corruption, and saw evil fruit. And they concluded that a perfectly good, all-powerful God could not be the creator of such a world. It was a logical impossibility. Therefore, they argued, there must be two gods, two eternal, opposing principles. First, there is the good God, the God of the New Testament. This God is pure, spirit, light, and love. He created the invisible world, our souls, the angels, heaven. But then, there is another power, an evil God, the creator of the material world. They sometimes called him Rex Mundi, the king of this world. This God created everything we can see and touch. The earth, our bodies, animals, all of it. And because this world is subject to decay and death, it is inherently evil. This idea, this radical dualism, is the key to understanding everything about the Cathars. It wasn't just a protest against church corruption. It was a complete reimagining of reality. It provided an answer to the age-old question, why do bad things happen in a world created by a good God? The Cathar answered they don't. This world wasn't created by the good God, and they believed this truth was hidden in plain sight within the Bible itself. They weren't inventing a new religion. They believed they were uncovering the original one. They read 2 Corinthians 4:4, where Paul speaks of the God of this age who has blinded the minds of the unbelievers. For the Cathars, this wasn't a metaphor for Satan's influence. It was a literal reference to the evil creator God, the Rex Mundi, who rules our material world. They read John 8:44, where Jesus tells his opponents, you belong to your father, the devil. He was a murderer from the beginning. Who, they asked, was a murderer from the beginning, who introduced death into the world? This led them to a shocking conclusion. The Old Testament was largely the book of the evil God, while the New Testament was the book of the good God. They rejected the stories of creation, the flood, the wars, all the acts of a God they saw as jealous, vengeful, and murderous. They were reading the same Bible as everyone else, but they were seeing a completely different story. A story of two rival gods, and of humanity caught in the crossfire. If the book of the two principles was the logical framework of Cathar belief, their second banned book was its soul. This is the Interrogatio I Johannes, the questions of John, also known as the Secret Supper. It was a text they treasured, believed to have been brought from the East, from the Bogomil Gnostics in Bulgaria. It's not a book of theology, it's a story, a secret creation myth, revealed by Jesus to his most beloved disciple, John, as they leaned together at the Last Supper. It's the Cathar Genesis. The story begins not on earth, but in heaven. Satan, the most glorious of God's angels, is the steward of the heavens, sitting at the right hand of the invisible Father. But pride enters his heart. He declares, I will set my throne upon the clouds and be like the Most High. For his rebellion, he is cast out. His face becomes like glowing iron, and with his 7 tails, he drags a third of the angels of God down with him from heaven. Fallen and furious, Satan decides to create a kingdom of his own. He commands the elements, raises the dry land from the waters, and fashions the sun, moon, and stars. He creates this world, our world, as a counterfeit kingdom, a prison of matter. But a kingdom needs subjects, and so, he devises his cruelest trick. He takes the fallen angels, those divine sparks of light who followed him, and he traps them. He fashions bodies of clay, and forces the genderless angelic souls into these prisons of flesh. He creates Adam and Eve. The angels grieve, trapped in these mortal forms. They don't know how to sin, how to perform the works of the flesh. So Satan, in the form of a serpent, enters the paradise he has made. He doesn't tempt Eve with an apple. He seduces her, teaching her carnal knowledge. This act ensures that the prison will perpetuate itself. Through procreation, more and more divine souls will be ensnared in bodies of clay, trapped in the evil god's material world, forgetting their true home in the realm of light. This myth changes everything. If you believe this is the true story of creation, it dictates how you must live. This world is not our home, it's a prison. Hell isn't some fiery pit we go to after we die. Hell is right here, right now. Our souls are trapped in a cycle of reincarnation, reborn again and again into this world of suffering, unless we can find a way to purify ourselves and escape. This is why the Cathars rejected the Catholic Church's teachings. How could Jesus, the messenger of the good God, have a real physical body? A body is a cage made by the evil God. So, Jesus must have been a pure spirit, an angel who only appeared to be human, a phantom sent to show us the way out. This belief is known as Docetism, the cross. It was an instrument of torture made of evil matter. To worship it was to worship the work of the evil God. Baptism with water. Water is part of the material world, so it's worthless. Marriage, its purpose is procreation, which only traps more souls. The Eucharist, the bread is just bread, a material substance. The only way out of the cycle of rebirth was through gnosis, secret knowledge, and a life of extreme purity. This was the path of the perfecti. They renounced all material things. They were celibate, owned no property, and followed a strict diet, avoiding meat, eggs, and cheese, as these were all products of sexual reproduction. Most Cathars, of course, couldn't live this way. They were the credentes, the believers. They married, worked, and lived in the world, but they supported the perfecti with food and shelter. Their ultimate hope was that, on their deathbed, a perfect would administer the one true sacrament, the consolamentum. This was a baptism of the Spirit, performed by the laying on of hands, which they believed would cleanse the soul of all sin and finally free it from the wheel of reincarnation, allowing it to return to the realm of the good God. The gap between these two versions of Christianity was not a crack, it was a chasm. There was no room for compromise. In the eyes of Rome, this wasn't just a different opinion. This was a different religion, an existential threat, and it had to be destroyed. The Cathars had a name for the Roman Church. They called it the Church of Wolves, a false church, they said, that worshipped a false god, the god of matter, wealth, and power. In Rome, Pope Innocent III, one of the most powerful popes in history, saw Catharism as a cancer eating away at the heart of Christendom. He first sent missionaries and preachers, like Saint Dominic, to debate the Cathars and win the people back, but it was too late. The Cathar faith was too deeply rooted. The breaking point came in January 1208. The Pope's personal representative, a legate named Pierre de Castelnau, was murdered after a heated argument with the Count of Toulouse, the most powerful protector of the Cathars. Innocent III was enraged. He did something unprecedented. He declared a crusade, not against Muslims in the Holy Land, but against fellow Christians in the heart of Europe. It was the first crusade in which Christians were guaranteed salvation for killing other Christians, and it unleashed a wave of terror and violence that would drown the Languedoc in blood for 20 years. In the summer of 1209, a massive Crusader army, some 10,000 strong, descended on the city of Oise, a prosperous city, home to both Catholics and a few hundred Cathars. The Crusader commander, a papal legate named Arnaud Amalric, demanded that the city hand over its heretics. The leaders of Catholics themselves made a courageous choice. They refused to surrender their neighbors. The Crusaders prepared for a long siege, but a small skirmish on a bridge escalated. Enraged, the camp followers and foot soldiers of the Crusader army stormed the walls, catching the defenders by surprise. The city fell in a matter of hours. As the Crusader knights entered the city, they were faced with a dilemma. The streets were filled with terrified citizens, Catholic and Cathar alike. How could they tell the heretics from the faithful? According to a contemporary chronicler, they asked their commander Arnaud Amalric what to do. His reply has echoed through history as a testament to fanaticism. Sedite eos, navit, enim, dominus, quae sunt, ios, kill them all, for the Lord knows those who are his. What followed was a massacre. Men, women, and children were slaughtered in the streets and in the churches where they sought refuge. The city was set on fire and burned to the ground. By the end of the day, as many as 20,000 people were dead. The crusade had shown its true face. This wasn't just about faith, it was about conquest. The religious heresy was the pretext for the powerful lords of northern France to seize the wealthy lands of the south, a goal they achieved when the Languedoc was finally annexed by the French crown. The war raged for decades. Castles fell, towns were burned, and the Cathar faith was driven underground, but it was not extinguished. The survivors retreated to their last, greatest stronghold, a mountain fortress that became the symbol of their defiance. After 1233 became the spiritual capital of the Cathar world, a sanctuary for the perfecti and for the fates. The local lords who had been stripped of their lands by the Crusaders for 10 years, it was their eagle's nest, their last beacon of hope. But in May of 1243, a royal army of thousands arrived at the foot of the mountain and began a siege. For 10 months, through a brutal winter, a few hundred defenders held off the entire army. They were bombarded by trebuchets, starved, and cut off from the world. Finally, in March 1244, the defenders knew the end was near. They negotiated a surrender. The terms were simple. All soldiers and lay people could go free, but the perfecti, the spiritual leaders, were given a choice: renounce their faith, or be burned at the stake. They were given a 2-week truce to consider their fate, and in those 2 weeks, something incredible happened. Instead of fleeing, more believers, men and women, chose to receive the consenti. They chose to become perfecti, knowing it was a death sentence. They chose to join their leaders in martyrdom. On the morning of March 16, 1244, over 200 Cathar perfecti walked calmly down the mountain. They didn't wait for the executioners. They walked into a huge pyre that had been lived. If you want to dive deeper into the forgotten histories of faith and the ideas that have shaped our world, I've put a link to my books in the description. And please, if this story moved you, subscribe and join our community for more journeys into the lost and forbidden corners of faith. Thank you for watching.